times in many walks of life, and actually it's been sort of like a message to me which says, Clive, you need to go and talk about this. So that's exactly what I'm doing. So what I want to do is just go through about why failure can be seen as a negative thing, and we want to use the wisdom of learning from failures. We also need to have a different mindset to failures. And in particular, managers tend to think about failure in the wrong way. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. And I also want to challenge you to think about failure in a different way. So when you go back to your offices and back to your work, you think about this from a different concept. And it's not all bad. So what's it all about? Well, failure, if you look up failure in Google or anywhere, there's lots of definitions you can have. For the focus in projects and testing applications, we'll have a look at that. But definition can be, failure is a state or condition of not meeting a desirable or intended objective. And it may be viewed as the opposite to success. Product failures range from failure to sell the product, and in the worst case, even to personal injury. So we know when applications fail, it can be like a nuisance, a pain, or if you're into some sort of safety critical system, like medicines, pharmaceuticals, avionics, it could ultimately lead to something much more serious. And we've got the failure to anticipate what could happen, the failure to perceive things are going wrong, and failure to carry out a task. Now, failure itself can be seen as an emotion that we need to manage. And it's actually our own egos that when we come across a failure, we feel really sort of, ugh, something's gone wrong here. And we need to drive through that to say, we need to learn from that actual experience. Sure, something's gone wrong, but let's learn from it and move forward. So I'm going to look at it in a different way and show how it can be linked into success. And of course, success is the opposite of failure. So you've got those elements to bear in mind. So it's really interesting. When I was actually out in Belgium, I was about to go out and do some consultancy for a company. And whilst I was waiting in the reception area, they had this TV screen which was scrolling through about their company. And this suddenly comes up, and it says, failure is not an option. And I thought to myself, well, maybe it is. Maybe it could be an option. Because in certain cases, failure is definitely an option we want to see because we want to learn from that. I know what they're trying to say in the world to their customers. Our products are going to be good, they're going to work, they're not going to fail on you. But sometimes failure is an option, and actually we want failures in order to move forward. So what's failure all about? We need to learn from the experience. We need to understand what causes the applications to fail, why they failed, and make sure that doesn't happen again. We need to have a healthy approach to risk, and what we're looking for is actually using the, when we fail, there is a risk of failure, but we want it to fail carefully. We want to manage the risk of that failure as well. So in this case, we want to fail well, if there is such a thing as failing well. In other words, we get the result, it's not doing what we expect it to do, but it's not a big problem. And we also want to do this in testing rather than actually out in live, against the sites. So we're going to take some risks. We know we're going to sort of drive our application to deliberately fail, but we're managing those risks. We understand what those risks are and learn from that. And that's going to help us find gaps in the application and then be able to plug them and resolve them in the future. We have to be resilient, keep trying. As I said about the emotion of failure, it can be almost quite damaging. But if we can get over that emotion to say we welcome failure, see it as a positive, then we can actually move forward. And we've got to practice in order to get better. Now, for example, I was saying about music, and this is one of the bits I picked up from this particular episode from the radio about music. And what they were saying is that you could be a really good musician, whether it's playing guitar, piano, whatever. And if I gave you some brand new music that you've never seen before, the first time you play it, you'll probably make some bad notes in it, you'll probably make some mistakes as you're doing it. But as you practice and practice and practice, you learn how to avoid those bad notes until you get to the solution, the perfection that you're striving for. And that's what I'm talking about here, is that no matter how good we are, how many developers are in here? Any developers? Because I know one of the things that developers do, they create this beautiful, sexy code. I'll be honest, I don't know why they ever call code sexy, but anyway. But they've got this beautiful, sexy code that they've crafted and worked lovingly over. And they want to see it working rather than failing. They want to show themselves as good developers, not developers who wrote code that fails. So there's this emotional intelligence and aspect where they want to show it working rather than not working. And we've got to get over that problem because we need to find out where the issues are. Need to reward the ability to find the real cause and issues. I've mentioned this already. Let's reward, recognise people. I know one of the things in one organisation in the States, they had a big bell on a table, and every time somebody found a bug in the code, they were able to bang the bell, all right, and let everybody know, hey, I've just found a defect here. And I know in a way that can actually strive others to do it, because if you've got somebody who's constantly banging the bell like this, and someone else is thinking, why are they finding all these things, and why am I not finding them? We can actually drive them to actually work a little bit harder. I always remember when I was on a skiing holiday once, and I'd taken my young son, who was probably about 7 or 8 at the time, and we were at the top of the hill. And it was a black run, so really quite a serious run. This was the first time my son had actually ever gone skiing. And he was at the top and said, "Come on, Dad, let's go." And whoosh, he went down it wasn't a straight line, down this hill. And I'm at the top there thinking, oh heck, I've got to follow him now. And I was worried about falling over and breaking a leg and all that sort of stuff. But he had no fear, he was just going, you go for it. So there's actually some lessons we can learn from youth from that point of view. It's very interesting actually, because in a UK school, they actually have a failure week in order to demystify the word. In other words, they try to drive out and they encourage people to be open and honest about things that have gone wrong in that week, to recognise that it's not a problem. And then when they succeed, they have a blow your trumpet week. So when people are successful, they also celebrate it because they've learned from that failure. Some of the statements are, we need to be expert learners, not just experts. And actually, to me, that is a really powerful thing. I want to keep learning. And in this industry, I've been in it for many, many years, and I am still learning. I've learned stuff today from Axel on his earlier talk, which I hadn't come across before, and it's great. We're constantly learning. Failure concentrates the pain, so we learn. When it goes wrong, we feel that pain, and we learn from it to avoid it in the future and get better. So, from that point of view, failure is usually etched in people's brains. Now, there are a number of quotes we can come up with. I had great fun going onto Google and just typing in successful failures and clicking on images. And so many inspirational things came up. This is just a few of them. Failure is not the opposite of success, it is the part of success. Success always hugs in private, but failure always slaps you in public. That's life. Failure is success in progress. Success consists of coming from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. Now that's really important, because failure can be seen as sometimes, it's like, and we tend to stop. But we've got to keep going and keep going and going, not get knocked back over it. Failure is on the road to success. Nelson Mandela says, Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. And we often see that in business. You know, people who've made, in business, they've failed sometimes in business, but they bounce back again. They learn from it. Failure is a part of life. If you don't fail, you don't learn. If you don't learn, you'll never change. You'll never change. And actually, there's a very interesting quote from, I think it was Einstein, and I'm trying to think what it is now. He said, what's it now? If we keep doing the same thing over and over again, we're just going to keep getting the same results. That's right. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get the same, expecting a different result. We're going to have to change. We're going to have to get better. So really, rather than failure being demotivational, we always need to be this as inspirational. And I think some of those as posters, if you put those up in your offices, it would actually encourage people, help them see how to move forward. Failure has created bad feeling from a young age. And if you think about this, when you're at school or a child, if you do something wrong, then you get blamed for it. And that's where it starts to get institutionalized in you, that you think that failure is a bad thing. So the result is we grow up thinking failure is bad. And when we get into organizations, we still think failure is bad. Organizations need to make it a safe place to admit and report failure. And this is really where it comes down to business, that managers need to recognise that failure is something we want. I mentioned here this Harvard Business Review, and this is actually an article you can download called The Spectrum of Reasons for Failure. I've actually got a copy of it, and I've got written notes all over it, but I would suggest you download a copy of this. But it talks about business up here, and there's an example where there's a CEO for a major company, and he was having a managers meeting, and he said, I want some updates on progress on how we're doing in our projects. And all the project managers were showing their reports as green, 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 green. No problems. And the CEO actually said to them, you're telling me that everything is going well, that everything is going right, yet last year we made enormous losses. How does that happen? Is there something you're not telling me? At the next meeting, one of the project managers actually stood up and actually presented his reports as being amber. Now, all the other project managers were thinking, my goodness, he's going to get really hit now. But actually, the CEO just stood up and applauded him. And he said, that's what I want to hear. I want to know where we're going wrong. And the following weeks after that, the RAG status of all the projects was like multicoloured. People were actually reporting exactly what it was, not what they thought what the CEO wanted to see. So the CEO was actually recognising and rewarding failure. He wanted to know, because from that you can build on it. But up to that point, all the project managers had got what they'd learned from school, which said, giving failure, giving bad news is bad. And he wanted to see it the other way around. In Google, again, you can look at this. There's a guy there called Astro Teller. He says, you must reward people for failing. If not, they won't take risks and make breakthroughs. If you don't reward failure, people hang on to a doomed idea for the fear of consequences. That wastes time and saps an organisation's spirit. And it's really interesting because I was reading in the news about 2 weeks ago, and you can look this up, that Google actually now reward failure. That's part of their institution where they say, if someone fails, we will acknowledge and reward you for that, for your honesty as well. So they are now actually looking at it in a very, very different way. And from that, they're actually starting to improve because we understand what the failure is. Now let's resolve it and move on to the next bit. So I say the Harvard Business Review, it comes up with a number of spectrums for failure. Now, I know you can't read this particularly well, on the screen. And just so you know, these presentations are actually going to be available from the website, QLab's website, in about 2 weeks' time, so you can download these. But if you want a copy earlier, just give me a business card and I can email it to you. But the spectrum of reasons for failure, starting at the top, you can see that they talk about these are being blameworthy and these are praiseworthy. And what it's actually saying is the first one is deviance. The next, it's saying individual chooses to violate a prescribed process or practice. Now that's blameworthy because they've actually deliberately done something they shouldn't do. The next one is inattention. The individual inadvertently deviates from specification. So they weren't paying attention, they weren't doing it properly. So yeah, maybe we ought to sort of say something to them. The third one is lack of ability. So the individual does not have the skills, conditions or training to do the job. And you can say, why not? Because there's always self-learning, there's always self-improvement. The next one is process improvement. Competent individual adheres to a prescribed but faulty or incomplete process. So it's getting to the point where it's not their fault really.